Thanks for tuning in to this episode of With Just 15 Defeats. I'm Teekosey, and today we're going to be reviewing and predicting the outcome of the Luis Ortiz versus Derric Rossy fight, which is on the undercard of the Shawn Porter versus Andre Berto matchup taking place on the 22nd of April in New York. On my channel I also have a preview of that big match up. If you're new to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button, and if you're already a subscriber, thank you for your continued support. If you have any questions on this fight or my assessment, I would be pleased to hear from you in the comment section below. I hope that you enjoy this preview and prediction. So as I say, this is being added to the Porter Berto undercard in the last couple of weeks, after Luis Ortiz signed with Haye, which looks to be just another chapter in the stop-start career of Luis Ortiz. Now, he got out of his previous contract late last year and signed with Matchroom, and I know that many people were thinking this is the start of where Luis Ortiz really elevates to the top of the division, because many people see him as the premier heavyweight. Many people are all on board the hype train of Luis Ortiz, and they just want to see big fights from him. And I think most people expected that this relationship with Matchroom was going to lead to an actual real world title shot, probably against Anthony Joshua. Now, as we know, what actually happened was a bizarre two-fight deal late last year, where he fought twice in the space of about 4 weeks against, firstly, Malik Scott, and then secondly against Dave Allen. Neither fight was anything to get excited about before or after or during. But we had those fights, and it was seen that they would be stepping stones to something bigger. In fact, in my Dave Allen, the Luis Ortiz versus Dave Allen preview that I did on my channel, I actually spoke in depth about what I thought was going to happen with Luis Ortiz, and I presumed that there would be some sort of long-term plan with Matchroom and Ortiz, where there would be maybe a 4 or 5 fight strategy, where we were getting 2 real quick fights out of the way, moving forward to some big fights, and possibly fighting on the undercard of the Anthony Joshua versus Wladimir Klitschko, with a view to becoming the #1 contender. Now, as we know, that still hasn't occurred, and we also know that the #1 contender for the IBF title is actually Kubrat Pulev. Now, whether that fight will ever happen, we have Pulev fighting in another Stay Busy fight against Kevin Johnson. I've got a preview of that on my channel if you want to check that out. I seem to remember that Luis Ortiz did hold an interim version of the WBA. I think he's highly ranked in WBA, and he may even hold some kind of mandatory position for that belt. But we know that the regular championship is being contested at some point this year. Shannon Briggs, Aquendo. There will be a preview of that fight on my channel coming in the next couple of weeks, if the fight actually materializes. So Luis Ortiz is in and amongst it, but he hasn't had those big fights. So looking at Luis Ortiz, he has a sterling record of 27 victories, 0 defeats, 23 knockouts. But for me, he's only fought 1 credible opponent in that career. Now, this is his 7th year as a professional, and he had a respectable amateur career, and many people believe that he's significantly older than the 38 years that we are led to believe that he actually is. But as a professional, he hasn't really fought anyone significant with the exception of Jennings. This was a fight that I enjoyed, and whilst Ortiz managed to get the stoppage victory, it wasn't that easy. I think it was a fairly close fight. The difference being that Ortiz was able to hurt Jennings over and over again. And Jennings has not fought since that fight. That was December 2015. So we're talking getting close to a year and a half of inactivity for Jennings. And I'd like to see him back in the ring because I think he's a decent level operator. But since then, we know that Ortiz moved on to Tony Thompson. Tony Thompson was once a high-level fighter, multiple world title challenger, and a real gatekeeper for the very elite fighters. But we have to accept that his best days are well past him. He then had the two fights that I alluded to, Malik Scott and Dave Allen. The Malik Scott fight was one of the worst heavyweight fights in recent years. Malik Scott really showed a lack of ambition, or really got his game plan completely wrong. And whilst it was one-sided in the fact that Ortiz clearly won it, clearly got a number of knockdowns, it was far from impressive from Ortiz. Now, Luis Ortiz is an interesting one because, as I say, there's a massive hype train surrounding him. Everyone thinks that there's a lot of people think that he is the best heavyweight operator. I personally have a number of concerns. He's a very efficient fighter. He's very economical. And he has numerous periods of inactivity throughout the fight. Now, I don't know whether that's down to his age, a lack of stamina, or the fact that he is lazy. But possibly against a high-level operator who has high-level work rate, we could see that Ortiz really struggles. And in that respect, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in the Hughie Fury versus Joseph Parker fight. A review of that is also on my channel in significant depth, because we know Hughie Fury has high work rate. We know that he has fantastic movement. So if he was able to get past Joseph Parker, he might be a very difficult opponent for Luis Ortiz. Likewise, I've always thought that Alexander Povetkin would be terrible for Luis Ortiz, but that's my personal opinion. Now, we do know that Luis Ortiz has phenomenal power. He's shown it against the opposition that he's been against and managed to knock out most of his opponents, and even the opponents that he hasn't knocked out, he has injured and hurt them, because he has an ability to close the show. And like I've said, that I think he has periods of inactivity mixed with explosive periods is a kind of weird combination, but those explosive periods, he's able to close the show. One of the other concerns I have is that he has not been chin-checked whatsoever. Partly because he hasn't really fought anyone of notable power. Obviously, Tony Thompson, he has knocked out a number of people in his career, has decent power, but that fight was just very, very one-sided. And we don't really know whether Ortiz has a chin. A lot of people look at him and think, oh, God, he must have a chin of granite. He must have. But does he? If he took a punch from Wilder, from Joshua, from Povetkin, from Joseph Parker, any of these top guys, would they find a home, and would it be nights out, or even lights out? So anyway, let's just move across. His opponent in this fight, it's not a fight to really get excited about, but we're seeing him in the ring against Derric Rossy. And Derric Rossy will be fighting in New York, and he is a New Yorker, so that would be great for him. And Derric Rossy is an interesting boxer. He has a record of 31 wins with 15 stoppage victories, but he's also lost 12 times and been stopped 5 times. So on the face of it, it's not a great record. It's not a record for anyone to really get excited about. But I don't think this is going to be as one-sided as probably a lot of people think. Because you just have to start digging into the CV of Rossy to see that he hasn't been a terrible fighter. Now, I think like a lot of these journeyman fighters, he didn't start out with the ambition to become a journeyman. He didn't suffer his first defeat until I think about his 15th or 16th fight, 3 or 4 years into his career, when he fought Eddie Chambers, who was on a great run himself. I think at the time he was about 27-0, and Eddie Chambers managed to get the victory. Then a year later, he fought Alexander Dimitrenko, who again was undefeated at the time, and he managed to record a victory win as well. Derric Rossy continued, and he fought a number of other guys. He continued to rack up wins, so I think he still had that ambition to fulfill his own ambitions, really. He then had a rematch with Eddie Chambers, where he was once again defeated. But this is where it starts to get really interesting, because Derric Rossy has been in the ring with a number of top guys over the years. He's got serious experience. He may have lost all of these fights, but he's been in there with decent guys. And not only that, he's been the distance with these guys. I'm just going to list them just for your information. So, Kubrat Pulev in 2011. Pulev actually stopped him inside 5 rounds, which is somewhat unusual. A couple of years later, he competed in Prize Fighter in the UK, and he got to the final where he lost to Audley Harrison and was stopped. But I suppose you've got to appreciate he'd already fought 2 other guys, including Ian Lewison, who, if my memory serves me correctly, Lewison went for it, threw a lot of punches, really blew his wad quite early. And obviously Rossy he got through it, but he obviously took some punishment. Since then he's been in the ring with Oquendo, went the distance over 10 rounds. He beat Prospect at the time, Joe Hanks, over 10 rounds. Glashkov, he was defeated in a very tight fight, over 10 rounds. Trevor Bryan, again over 10 rounds defeat. Bermain Stavern, a fairly close 10-round defeat. And also Erkan, a close 10-round defeat. So whilst a lot of people will be expecting Ortiz to go in there and blow him out, I would not be surprised if Derric Rossy is capable of fighting to the later rounds, or even going the distance. I believe this is either going to be an 8 or a 10-rounder. Both fighters are going to be of a similar size. They're both about the same height. I think they've both got a similar sort of reach, so they're going to be fairly similar. And Derric Rossy, whilst he's not the greatest fighter, he's obviously got enough skills to go the distance with some credible opponents. And also, some of these fights have actually been fairly close on the judges' scorecard. So he's obviously capable of winning rounds and boxing well. I think he's got a credible jab, and I wouldn't expect him to embarrass himself. So a lot of times I always have some difficulty in predicting Ortiz, because I'm one of the few people out there that really speak up about some of the concerns that I have for him. And yes, whilst I fully expect Luis Ortiz to come through this, I'm not sure whether Ortiz will look that great in doing so. However, despite that, I am going to go for an Ortiz win by stoppage. I think the fight could be fairly close, but likewise in how Ortiz was victorious over Jennings, he was able to hurt him. As I said, Rossy has gone the distance on several occasions, but possibly when he feels the power of Ortiz, he may crumble. So I'm going to go for a late stoppage to Ortiz. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode of With Just 15 Defeats. If you've got any questions on this fight or my assessment, I would be pleased to hear from you in the comments section below. If you're new to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you for your continued support. Enjoy the fight. I've been Teekosey, and this is With Just 15 Defeats.